I think if I really look at the making of the work itself and the kinds of spaces that the dancers came from, because a lot of the work is the material that they proposed, and all of the work is devised, which means that I proposed a few ideas, and then they gave me material back. They actually made the material. So in a way, the work itself is based very much on what they propose. So there's a whole lot of transformation that happened in the way that that they looked at intimacy, that they were able to deconstruct this idea of proximity, of gaze, to a point where you're really going down to the basics of it. You know, the very fundamentals of two bodies coming together and are in relationship, in some kind of a relationship with each other. That beyond a point, you realize that it was way beyond cultural codes and habits and what you define as acceptable, not acceptable, because you were looking at really fundamental human, animalistic realm of ideas, that it was no longer about where they came from anymore. They made a huge transformation, transition, because one of them is gay, one of them isn't, you know, so there's a whole lot of stuff there that they had to deal with. But in that was the project, that actually none of it matters, that it is really about two bodies coming together and the possibility of intimacy. And beyond the point, it doesn't matter that they're two men or even humans. You know, there's something else that emerges. I made a work that was about 30 minutes long, and it was all to do with the turning of the body. You know, so how does the body turn? How can that turn be initiated by various parts of the body? So very, very anatomical. And once I showed the work, I realized that actually in the times that we live in, especially in this country, I felt like it was irrelevant to make work like that. I felt like it wasn't the time for aesthetic preoccupations. It felt like the arts had to respond to the environment in which they were situated. And round about the same time, I looked at Nishit's text, that article that he wrote in 2000, and I felt like it was as valid now as it was 15 years ago. And part of me really felt like I wanted to respond to him, and I wanted to build on what he'd written. And I also thought that the article, which proposes why my bedroom habits are your business, had a kind of setting that excited me. It was, you know, it was a bed, and already as a maker of dance, I was excited by the constraints of that space. So I knew immediately that there was a project there hanging about, and then the idea was to unearth it. There are many reasons. Actually, I came across the charpai in Lalit's house. We'd gone for lunch. Lalit's one of the dancers in QueenSize. I went to his house for lunch, and he lives in Heartland, Haryana. So he's in Gurgaon. And his house was full of about 10-15 such charpais. And I looked at it, I jumped on it, I sort of looked at what the object did. I was excited by the fact that it came from one of the dancers and his setup, and so I wasn't sort of borrowing something from outside of what the context of the work itself. I was excited by the sound it made. There was a certain kind of dissent that was sitting in the sound itself. I was excited by the fact that it was there's a weave there, which means that you can see through it in most places, and there is a certain kind of transparency that it brings in, that there is nothing to hide. You can see through the bed. So that also became a kind of an idea, that it proposes a kind of see-throughness and inviting people to see underneath, on it, on the side. And more than anything else, I got excited by the material itself, that it places you in a very, very generic hinterland kind of space, that you're no longer only talking city. You're talking about all kinds of households everywhere in the country, and so this conversation needn't become a city-based elitist conversation. I have to say I haven't received a kind of reaction that isn't quite what I want, because it's always been, yes, there has been some discomfort that people have had to deal with, and especially with QueenSize, I can see the audience when they're watching it. Everyone can see everyone else while they're watching and encountering this really close intimacy between two men on a bed. And yet you can see discomforts. You can see some people shifting eyes. You can see the eyes go up and look at the lights for a long time. There's all of that. But it's never been a kind of discomfort which has surfaced into any kind of anger or any of that. So in a way, the idea is also for people to encounter it, and if there is any discomfort, perhaps resolve it through the through the watching of the work, or not, or go away feeling disconcerted by what they've seen.
And perhaps that's where they begin to question.
Yeah, perhaps that's where also the value of looking at or encountering a work like this is also.